Think about a letter you might get, a birthday card, maybe a bill, something totally ordinary.
Uh-huh.
Now, what if hidden right there in the paper fibers, completely invisible, there's a secret message?
Sounds like something out of a spy novel.
Exactly. But it wasn't fiction. The whole world of secret inks. It was a real, a vital part of espionage, a whole scientific field, really, working away in the shadows.
And what's really amazing is the sheer cleverness it required, especially during wartime, being able to send secret messages and, maybe more importantly, intercept the enemy's secret messages. That was huge strategically.
Immense value, yeah. We're basically talking about a hidden battlefield where simple ink became a weapon.
And cracking its secrets could literally mean the difference between winning and losing.
Right. In this deep dive, we're pulling back the curtain on that whole world. We're using first-hand accounts from people inside a secret ink bureau.
So not just dry history.
No, definitely not. It's about the ingenuity, the obstacles, and that constant back and forth, the cat-and-mouse game between Allied and German intelligence with this invisible writing.
You can expect some real aha moments, seeing how these techniques worked and how they kept having to evolve.
Exactly. And our info today, it comes straight from those sources, people who were right there on the front lines of this secret war, detailing their work.
Okay, so where do we start? The initial challenge, maybe?
Yeah, let's start there. Allied scientists, they were basically facing this massive problem. How do you find one single method, a kind of universal key, to reveal any secret ink the enemy might be using?
That's a tall order, like finding one key for every lock imaginable.
And logically, they started thinking about water. It's common, accessible.
Makes sense. If water's the base, then revealing it wouldn't be about a chemical reaction with the ink itself.
Right, it'd be about spotting the physical changes to the paper. Did the water disturb the fibers?
Which led them down the path of photography initially, trying to capture these microscopic disturbances in the paper fibers.
You can imagine the frustration, can't you? Believing the evidence is right there, physically on the paper, but just not being able to actually see it.
It really shows the core difficulty. Invisible ink is designed not to be seen. So finding something that leaves almost no trace.
That's the puzzle. And here's where it gets really good. The big breakthrough. It was almost laughably simple after all that complex photography work.
Iodine vapor.
Iodine vapor. Just ordinary iodine.
It's often the case, isn't it? The simplest solutions get overlooked when you're focused on complexity.
So imagine you take this blank-looking letter, put it in a container, and just introduce iodine vapor.
And the vapor reacts not necessarily with the ink residue, but with the disturbed paper fibers themselves, where the ink, even just water, was applied.
And poof, the writing appears. Simple chemistry, but the impact. Massive for wartime intelligence.
The source material really talks about the elation, the relief, when they discovered this. Like, finally, they could see what the enemy was hiding.
Yeah, a real sense of catching up, maybe even getting ahead. But that feeling didn't last long.
No, which shows you just how fast information could travel, even supposedly secret information.
There's that anecdote in the source about the French liaison officer.
Right, apparently a bit too talkative after a briefing.
And it shows how quickly the Germans learned about the iodine vapor method. It just highlights how leaky even secure operations could be.
It's a constant vulnerability in intelligence, isn't it? How do you keep a technological edge when secrets can spread that fast?
And the result was German scientists very quickly grasped the iodine technique and, crucially,
they developed a new secret ink, one that iodine vapor wouldn't reveal.
Talk about a rapid countermove. Just when the Allies thought they'd cracked it, the enemy adapted.
Imagine the pressure back on the Allied chemists. That must have been intense.
Absolutely. Back to the drawing board. But now with even more urgency, because their main weapon was suddenly useless against this new threat.
The source mentions they really doubled down, intensified the search for a new way.
And the next Allied response was pretty clever too. American chemists figured out that if you lightly dampened the entire letter after writing the secret message.
And then dried and pressed it.
Exactly. It basically masked the specific disturbances from the secret ink because all the fibers were now disturbed by the overall dampening, so the iodine vapor wouldn't work anymore.
That's quite ingenious. It creates a kind of stalemate, though, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, the Allies could dampen suspected letters to hide their own messages if they thought they might be intercepted using iodine. But it also meant they couldn't use iodine to read any German ink that might still be vulnerable if the Germans also started dampening.
Right. A good defensive move, but not helping them read the enemy's mail.
Precisely. But they didn't stop there. They came up with a counter to the countermeasure.
Okay, now my head's spinning. What next?
They developed a way to tell if a letter had been dampened in the first place
Ow.
by applying two different chemicals. If the letter had been dampened, the streaks from these chemicals would sort of blur together. If it hadn't, they'd stay distinct.
Okay, and the logic there is?
Pretty sound, actually. Why would an ordinary person bother carefully dampening and pressing a whole letter?
You wouldn't. Only someone trying to hide something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So even if you couldn't read the ink, a dampened letter became a massive red flag. It strongly suggested a hidden message and that the sender was likely involved in espionage.
But still, the ultimate goal was to actually read the messages regardless of dampening or anything else.
Right, and they kept pushing. The source describes this relentless effort, which eventually led to what they called the greatest triumph.
The infallible reagent.
The infallible reagent. Something that could apparently reveal secret ink even on dampened letters under pretty much any condition.
And this one, they kept very quiet.
Extremely quiet. The source stresses how vital it was. Only a handful of people knew the formula, and apparently even today, revealing it would be considered, well, irresponsible because it could still be misused.
That really drives home how important these breakthroughs were in the real world of war.
Absolutely. And to show how this all played out, the source gives us a fantastic case study. The Patricia letter.
Ah, yes. Intercepted down on the Mexican border. And not just because they suspected secret ink, right?
No, it also had these strange hieroglyphics written on it, which just goes to show any deviation from the norm could trigger suspicion.
It really shows how espionage isn't just one thing. It's layers, clues.
Exactly. And the secret ink message they eventually deciphered was itself pretty cryptic, talking about the incarceration of the trio and plans for the boys going to France.
Very vague. Deliberately so, you'd assume, for deniability if it got caught.
Precisely. But the letter still holds mysteries. Those hieroglyphics were never fully deciphered, apparently.
And wasn't there something else? Poetry.
Yes. 2 lines of poetry, one Keats, one Milton, but with odd marks indicating the stanchion, the rhythm. Why?
Another code. A password. An identifier.
Who knows? The source even throws it out there to you, the listener. Can you figure out what these strange bits mean?
It's a great reminder that even with all the science, the human element of codes and subtle signals was still key.
And there's another layer. The letter mentions a Hopkinson Smith,
And there was a suspected German agent with a very similar name.
who conveniently disappeared around that time. It raises all sorts of questions about who this Patricia actually was and what her role involved.
And it wasn't just letters, was it? They were hiding ink and other things.
Right. The source mentions using things like face creams to transport the actual secret ink chemicals.
Incredible. Makes you look at everyday objects differently. The sheer resourcefulness is something else.
It really is. And you know, these big discoveries, the breakthroughs, they were only part of the story. The Secret Ink Bureau's day-to-day work was often much more routine.
You mean the sheer volume of letters they had to check?
Exactly. The source says they examined thousands of suspicious letters every week.
Thousands. Imagine the manpower, the attention to detail needed for that scale.
And it wasn't random. They focused on mail going to known suspects or letters with these veiled business deals or social chats that just didn't quite add up.
Potential covers for spy talk.
Right. And their skills went beyond just finding the ink. They developed ways to carefully restore the ink after developing and photographing it.
Why do that?
So they could continue surveillance. If you arrest someone the moment you find one message, you might miss the bigger picture, the wider network. It shows real strategic patience.
Very calculated. The source also touches on the really covert stuff, doesn't it? Intercepting diplomatic bags.
Oh yes, secretly intercepting, opening, photographing the contents, and then resealing diplomatic pouches, mail from neutral countries, even letters from suspected American officials.
The stakes there must have been astronomical getting caught doing that.
Huge diplomatic incidents, at the very least, which meant they needed incredible skill in forgery.
Opening envelopes without a trace.
Steam was apparently a common method for softening the gum, but then resealing perfectly, maybe adding new gum from unused envelopes, pressing the seams just right.
And replicating seals. Diplomatic seals can be incredibly intricate.
Extremely difficult. The source describes this complex process using lead, rubber, gutta percha, graphite, even electroplating with copper to make perfect duplicates.
And apparently just getting the original seal off the document without damaging it was a major hurdle in itself.
It really underlines the level of specialized craft needed within this bureau. It wasn't just chemists.
So it's not surprising they had to recruit outside the usual scientific community.
No, the source mentions bringing in people with, shall we say, practical experience in deception, skilled forgers, counterfeiters.
An unlikely alliance between science and, well, crime.
Needs must during wartime, I suppose. It shows the extraordinary measures they took.
There's that funny story, too, about the Mexican president's letter.
The Carranza letter. Yes, they duplicated the seal, but it looks slightly off, defective. They couldn't figure out why until someone realized the original seal wasn't perfectly made either. It had been impressed using a rare Spanish coin.
Amazing. A tiny detail almost missed solves the problem.
It's those little details that make this history so compelling. And ultimately, as the source notes, looking at the official history of the Bureau, MI8, their impact was significant.
They uncovered dozens of major spy letters.
Over 50 significant ones, leading to arrests, disrupting enemy plans. It wasn't just a side project. It was a crucial part of Allied intelligence.
So wrapping this up, this whole deep dive into secret inks, it really shows this incredible world of scientific creativity, right?
Absolutely. Constant innovation, always trying to adapt to what the other side was doing, and the stakes couldn't have been higher.
And it makes you think, doesn't it? That even the most mundane things, like a simple letter, could hold these incredible secrets.
And it highlights that timeless human desire to communicate in secret, and the equally persistent drive to uncover those secrets. Understanding these old techniques gives you a window into that ongoing intelligence battle.
Which brings us to a final thought for you, our listener. Think about today, our digital age. Everything's encryption, cyber this, cyber that. Are there parallels here? Do we see echoes of the same challenges, the same kinds of breakthroughs, just in a different digital realm compared to secret inks?
That's a great question. Has the fundamental game of secret communication really changed that much? Or have just the tools, the methods evolved?
Something to think about, that enduring need for secure communication and that constant tension between those making secrets and those trying to break them.